Welcome, seekers of wisdom, dreamers of story, and wanderers of wonder. You have stepped into a realm where myth breathes and poetry sings. A place where words are not mere marks on a page, but living vessels of spirit and truth. Today, you join me on a journey through the Mead of Poetry, a tale older than time, born of gods and giants, fire and ice, sacrifice and rebirth. This is not just a story. It is a drink for the soul, a sip of ancient nectar that has passed from the lips of gods to the hearts of humankind. Each verse carries not only memory but magic, the power to inspire courage, to awaken longing, to ignite the spark of creation within you. As you watch, listen, and imagine, allow yourself to drift across the 9 worlds, to walk beside Odin, to hear the whispers of Kvasir, to feel the hunger of giants and the cunning of dwarves. This is your invitation to journey into the heart of Norse myth and return transformed. Raise your spirit, open your heart, and let us together taste the mead that once made poetry eternal. What if I told you there exists a drink so powerful? It could turn your words into fire, your thoughts into prophecy, and your voice into immortality? This is not a fantasy. It is the mead of poetry, the nectar that gave birth to every poem, every song, every truth whispered through the ages. And tonight, I will take you to where it was forged, stolen, and spilled across the world to become the gift we now call inspiration. Subscribe for more history. Like and comment if you believe history should never be forgotten, and share to spark conversation about the lessons we must learn from the past. This is not myth. This is history, and it begins here. In the earliest days, before the world was fully formed, there was war among the gods. The Aesir and the Vanir clashed with fire and fury, each side seeking dominion over the 9 worlds. For years their battles raged, leaving both weary and broken. But even gods cannot fight forever. At last the 2 tribes sought peace, a truce sealed not by swords but by a sacred ritual. They gathered in solemn ceremony, both Aesir and Vanir, spitting into a great vessel as a pledge of unity. Yet from this mingling of divine essence, something wondrous was born. Out of the cauldron rose Kvasir, a being not of war, but of wisdom. His form was radiant, his presence serene, his eyes holding the depth of all knowledge. Kvasir walked among gods and mortals alike, and wherever he went, he answered every question asked of him. No mystery was too deep, no riddle too complex. He was the living embodiment of understanding, the harmony of 2 rival worlds made flesh. And yet, as his voice spread, so too did envy. For in Kvasir's words was power, power to heal, to guide, to inspire. Many revered him, but others coveted his gift. His birth was not just the dawn of wisdom. It was the first spark in a tale that would lead to betrayal, murder, and the forging of the mead of poetry. In that moment, however, Kvasir's light was pure. He was a bridge, a teacher, a reminder that even from bloodshed, beauty can be born. The gods marveled at their creation, not yet realizing the destiny they had set into motion. Thus begins the tale of wisdom given, stolen, and transformed into the drink that would forever change the course of human history. Kvasir's wisdom spread far and wide, from Asgard to Midgard, from the halls of kings to the cottages of farmers. His voice carried clarity. He answered questions none could solve, gave counsel where strife festered, and illuminated paths hidden in shadow. No one could best him in riddles, for his knowledge was drawn from both the Aesir and the Vanir, woven with the essence of all things. But such brilliance stirs envy as much as admiration. Among those who desired his gift were 2 dwarves, Fjalar and Galar. Unlike the gods, whose power was divine, dwarves forged their greatness through craft, cunning, and cruelty. They watched Kvasir with greedy eyes, knowing that his blood itself carried the essence of wisdom. One day, Kvasir came to their hall, innocent of their schemes. The dwarves welcomed him with flattery, seating him at their stone table, pouring him fine ale. They asked him questions, feigned reverence, and praised his every word. Yet, beneath their smiles lay malice. When Kvasir lowered his guard, they struck. No blade, no battle, simply a silent murder in the depths of their dwelling. As his life drained away, the dwarves caught his blood in great vats. They whispered to one another of the wonders they would make of it, a potion unlike any other, a mead brewed with honey, and the essence of wisdom. What had been pure and living was now stolen and corrupted by greed. The gods did not know. Mortals did not hear his final breath. To the world, Kvasir simply vanished, leaving behind silence where once wisdom flowed. The dwarves hid their crime with lies, claiming that Kvasir had choked upon his own knowledge, that his brilliance had consumed him. But in truth, his murder marked a turning point, for from his death would be born the Mead of Poetry, the drink that could grant power not through strength of arms, but through mastery of word and thought. His slayers did not see themselves as killers, but as creators. And yet, creation born of blood carries shadow. Thus ended the life of Kvasir, the wisest of all beings. His gift would live on, but twisted into treasure, coveted and fought over for ages to come, deep within the dwarves' hidden halls. Fjalar and Galar prepared to commit an act that would shape the destiny of gods and men alike. They stood over the great vats of Kvasir's blood, the lifeblood of wisdom itself, still warm with divinity. The dwarves were no strangers to craft. Their forges birthed weapons of legends, treasures of untold worth. But this was different. They were about to create not a weapon of steel, but a weapon of spirit. Into the vessels of blood they poured golden honey, thick and fragrant, harvested from the secret hives of the mountains. The dwarves stirred the mixture with care, whispering incantations in the dark tongue of their kind, binding sweetness to wisdom, death to life. Slowly, the transformation began. The liquid shimmered deep crimson, turning to a rich golden amber glow, alive with power. Fjalar dipped a ladle and tasted the first sip. His eyes widened, his breath caught in his throat. Words spilled from his mouth. Not ordinary words, but poetry, rich and flowing, as though the rhythm of creation itself sang through him. Galar followed, and soon both dwarves laughed with delight, their tongues alive with verses, their minds racing with visions. "This," whispered Fjalar, "is no mere drink. It is the Mead of Poetry." Wordless awe hung between them, yet greed quickly took its place. They knew the gods would covet this, that kings would kill for it, that poets would beg for even a single drop. They swore to guard it, to use it for their own designs. But dwarves are tricksters by nature, and even their bonds would twist. The mead was stored in 3 great vessels, Elixir, the mighty cauldron, and 2 golden jars, Son and Bodhin. Within them lay not only the spirit of Kvasir, but the fate of countless generations. For whoever drank of this brew would gain the gift of poetry, the power of wisdom and eloquence, the fire to turn thought into creation. But creation birthed in blood and greed carries a shadow. Though some drops would inspire greatness, others would fall as folly, as drunken nonsense mistaken for song. Thus the mead bore both blessing and curse. The dwarves looked upon their work with pride and fear. They had captured the soul of wisdom in a vessel. They had created something greater than swords, greater than gold. And yet, in their hearts, they knew such power would never remain theirs alone. It would call to gods, to giants, to men. It would bring war, trickery, and pursuit. The Mead of Poetry was born. And already, destiny stirred. The dwarves, Fjalar and Galar, were no longer the same beings they once were. Each sip of the Mead of Poetry transformed their minds, filling their thoughts with visions and their tongues with words they did not know they possessed. In their secret halls, they recited verses that bent the air itself. Poetry so beautiful, it could silence storms. So sharp, it could pierce the heart like steel. But the power of the mead was not limited to its makers. News of their creation began to seep through whispers and rumor. Wandering travelers spoke of a strange golden drink that could make an fool into a prophet, and a coward into a singer of great renown. Kings began to dream of it, bards longed for it, and warriors craved it to immortalize their names in verse. The dwarves, knowing its worth, used it as both gift and weapon. They offered a taste to some, only to bind them into bargains. They could not escape. A single sip brought inspiration, but also hunger, an unquenchable thirst for more. Men who drank became poets. Yes, but also addicts to the golden truth. Some sang songs that stirred the hearts of armies. Others raved in madness when denied a second drink. Even the earth seemed to listen when the mead was spilled. Where drops fell, flowers bloomed brighter, and birds sang sweeter. Yet where too much was wasted, the air grew heavy with sorrow, as though wisdom turned to grief when misused. The mead was both blessing and curse, echoing the duality of its creation, born from murder, yet carrying the seed of inspiration. The dwarves themselves quarreled. Fjalar believed the mead should be hoarded, kept as their private treasure, a weapon against gods and giants alike. Galar, ever the trickster, sought to trade it, to weave webs of power with it, to trick kings and deceive rivals. Their disputes shook their cavern halls with angry words, each verse more venomous than the last. And yet, for all their schemes, destiny had already begun to stir. Far away in the realm of the giants, Suttungr heard whispers of this wondrous brew. His heart burned with desire, for giants feared being outwitted by gods and mortals alike. If such a drink existed, he would claim it for his kin. The Mead of Poetry was no longer a secret. It was a beacon, calling across the 9 worlds. Its power could not be contained forever, far across the 9 worlds. In the shadowed realm of the Jotnar, there lived a giant named Suttungr. He was a figure of immense strength, his voice like thunder rolling across the mountains, and there was, unlike many of his kin who reveled in destruction, Suttungr was cunning, and his mind burned with hunger for power. When word of the Mead of Poetry reached his ears, his desire flared like fire. He feared the gods would use it to outwit his kin, feared mortals might rise to rival him, and most of all, he envied the dwarves who dared to hoard such a treasure. One night, Suttungr journeyed to the halls of Fjalar and Galar. The dwarves welcomed him with uneasy smiles, but Suttungr's presence filled their cavern like an avalanche. He demanded to see the mead, his eyes glowing with greed. The dwarves, clever but fearful, stalled with riddles and flattery. Yet Suttungr was not easily deceived. He had learned of their crimes, the slaying of Kvasir and the theft of his blood. With that knowledge, he threatened them. Either surrender the mead, or be crushed beneath his fury. The dwarves, realizing they could not match the might of the giant, offered a twisted bargain. They promised him the mead, but only if he spared their lives. Suttungr agreed, though his eyes promised vengeance should they dare to trick him. Reluctantly, they led him to the great vessels, Otharir, Son, and Bothen, glowing with divine radiance. Suttungr's hands trembled as he gazed upon them. For a moment, awe silenced his rage. He dipped a ladle and tasted a sip, and at once his heart swelled with song. The rhythm of the cosmos filled his chest, and verses poured unbidden from his lips. Even his thunderous voice softened, transformed into a melody. For the first time, the giant felt what it meant to touch creation, not through brute force, but through beauty. Yet his awe swiftly turned to possession. He vowed that none but his kin would ever taste this treasure. Gathering the vessels in his massive arms, he left the dwarves alive, but broken in spirit. Fjalar and Galar watched him vanish into the mountains, cursing their fate, yet secretly relieved to escape death. Suttungr carried the mead to his home, the mountain Hnitbjörg, and there he hid it deep within the stone, entrusting its guardianship to his daughter. Gunnlöd, the Mead of Poetry, was no longer in the hands of dwarves. It now belonged to the giants, and thus a new chapter of its destiny began. Suttungr the giant carried the Mead of Poetry with care, as though it were the beating heart of the world. Its vessels, Pothiria, Sonnen, and Bothen, glowed in his arms as he climbed the jagged cliffs of Hnitbjörg, a mountain crowned with storm clouds. The journey was long and perilous, but Suttungr's determination was greater than any hardship. He would hide the mead where no god, dwarf, or mortal could reach it. The mountain groaned beneath his steps as he carved a chamber deep within its belly. Firelight flickered on the stone walls as Suttungr placed the cauldron and jars upon an altar of rock, the glow of the mead casting golden rays into the darkness. For a moment, the cavern seemed transformed into a temple, as though the mead itself was divine. But Suttungr knew that treasure draws thieves, and wisdom attracts envy. He needed a guardian, someone who could resist trickery and endure solitude, yet still tend to the treasure with care. He turned to his daughter, Gunnlöd, a woman of beauty and sorrow, whose heart was as steadfast as the stone of the mountain. "Daughter," Suttungr said, his voice echoing like thunder in the cavern, "to you I entrust this gift. Guard it with your life, for in these vessels lies the fate of gods and men. None must taste it, save those I deem worthy." Gunnlöd bowed her head, though her eyes lingered on the golden glow of the mead. She felt its call within her chest, as though the poetry within yearned to escape and be sung. Yet she accepted her duty. Suttungr sealed the mountain with sorcery, locking its halls with runes of power and curses, whispered in the language of giants. None could enter save through his will, or cunning greater than his own. Thus the Mead of Poetry slept within stone, guarded by Gunnlöd's watchful eyes. Days turned to nights, seasons into years, and still the mead remained untouched by mortal lips. Gunnlöd sang to it in the darkness, her voice echoing through the cavern, weaving songs of loneliness and longing. She was the warden of inspiration, yet forbidden to drink the very nectar she protected. 2. But even the strongest walls cannot hold destiny, for far away, in the high halls of Asgard, Odin All-Father heard whispers of the mead's resting place. The gods hungered for its power, fearing that in the hands of giants, poetry might become a weapon. Odin's mind turned toward Hnitbjörg, and his cunning heart began to weave a plan. The mead was hidden, yes, but no treasure remains guarded forever. Deep within the heart of Hnitbjörg, where no sunlight reached and no birds sang, Gunnlöd sat in her vigil. She was the daughter of Suttungr, born of giant blood. Yet unlike her father, her heart was quiet and her spirit tender. Her father had given her the task of guarding the Mead of Poetry, a treasure so powerful that gods and mortals alike would risk all to claim it. At first, Gunnlöd accepted her role without question. She was dutiful, obedient, and honored the trust placed upon her. She lit fires in the cavern, their glow reflecting off the golden jars, Sorn and Bothen, and the mighty cauldron, Spodotharia. She sang to herself as she watched, her voice soft and haunting. weaving melodies that echoed off the stone walls. Her songs became the only companions of the mead, lullabies to wisdom, verses of loneliness. Yet, as the years passed, Gunnlöd began to feel the weight of her task. She was bound to solitude, unable to leave the cavern, forbidden even to taste the nectar she protected. And still the mead called to her. Its golden glow seemed alive, pulsing with desire to be shared. Often she would sit before it, her hands trembling, her lips dry with yearning, but she would not betray her father's command. Her beauty was spoken of in whispers among the giants. Hair dark as midnight, eyes like glimmering amber, skin pale as snow. Yet few ever saw her, for she lived in shadow, hidden away with her burden. There was both sorrow and strength in her, a balance that made her more than just a guardian. She was a living poem herself, a verse of loyalty, of longing, of sacrifice. At times, Gunnlöd wondered if her father had given her the task not out of trust, but out of cruelty. Did he know what it meant to chain her to silence? To deny her the very gift she cradled? Did he see her not as a daughter, but as another lock upon the mead's door? Still she endured. Her songs grew richer, carrying the weight of her heart. The mead seemed to respond, glowing brighter when she sang, as though it too longed for release. Some nights, Gunnlöd dreamed of a stranger who would come, one who could free the verses imprisoned in golden jars. She would awaken with tears, uncertain if the dream was hope or warning. Unbeknownst to her, far beyond the mountain, Odin Allfather had already set his gaze upon Hnitbjörg. His plan was weaving, his disguise prepared, and destiny once again began to stir. Far above Midgard, in the golden halls of Asgard, Odin Allfather sat upon his high throne, Hlidskjalf. From there, he could see across the 9 worlds, his single eye sharp as the point of a spear, ever seeking wisdom and power. Though he was already the wisest of the Aesir, Odin's thirst for knowledge was endless. He had hung upon Yggdrasil to learn the runes, sacrificed his eye for sight beyond sight, and wandered in disguise to. Yet still he hungered. Whispers reached his ears of a wondrous treasure, born of blood and honey, the Mead of Poetry. Tales told of dwarves who had brewed it from Kvasir's lifeblood, and of the giant Suttungr, who now guarded it deep within Hnitbjörg. Odin's heart stirred with desire, for he knew that whoever possessed the mead would hold dominion not through war, but through words, to inspire kings, to stir hearts, to weave spells with song. Such was a power even greater than the might of Mjolnir. The gods of Asgard gathered in Odin's hall, and he spoke to them of the mead. Some scoffed, saying it was folly to covet such a thing. Others feared Suttungr's wrath, but Odin silenced them with a glance, his will unshakable. "Wisdom is the root of power," he said, "and poetry is its flowering. With the mead, no secret will be beyond us, no tongue silent in our cause. I will bring it to Asgard, no matter the cost." From that moment, Odin's mind wove schemes like a spider spinning its web. He knew Suttungr's strength, and he knew brute force would fail. The mead was locked away, guarded by sorcery, and by the giant's daughter, Gunnlöd. If he were to claim it, he must rely not on muscle, but on cunning. So Odin began to wander, cloaking himself in disguise, as was his way. He sought knowledge of Hnitbjörg, of its runes and its guardians. He watched from afar, listening to the songs that echoed faintly from within the mountain. He felt the pull of the mead across the worlds, as though its verses whispered to him alone. At night, Odin dreamed of golden vessels and of Gunnlöd's sorrowful voice. In his dream, she looked at him with eyes both fierce and tender, as if she already knew he would come. He awoke with resolve. It was not only the mead he would claim, but the heart of the guardian herself. Thus, the All-Father's desire took shape, not merely to drink of the mead, but to steal it, to outwit giants and bend destiny to his will. The quest had begun. Once Odin resolved to claim the Mead of Poetry, he wasted no time. The All-Father was no stranger to long journeys. His one eye had gazed into countless lands. His feet had trodden the paths of gods, giants, and men alike. But this quest was unlike any before. To wrest the mead from Suttungr, brute force would fail. Cunning and disguise would be his weapons. Odin shed his golden armor and clothed himself as a wanderer. He donned a broad hat to shadow his face, wrapped himself in a dark blue cloak, and carried a simple staff. No one looking upon him would see the ruler of Asgard. They would see only a weary traveler, a man who lived by wit and chance. Such disguises had served him before, and now, more than ever, he needed secrecy. He left Asgard quietly, slipping away from the eyes of the other gods. Hugin and Munin, his ravens, circled above, bearing tidings from the 9 worlds. Their wings whispered of danger, yet also of pathways hidden. Odin followed where fate guided him, his heart fixed upon Hnitbjörg, where the mead lay sealed within stone. His first destination was the land of the giants. He knew that to reach the mountain, he would need a way inside, and that meant finding someone who could bring him closer to Suttungr's stronghold. Odin wandered through valleys and across rivers, speaking with shepherds, laborers, and even outcasts, gathering whispers of the giant's kin. Slowly the threads wove together, pointing him toward Baugi, Suttungr's brother, who worked the fields with his many slaves. As Odin approached Baugi's land, he adopted a new name, as was his custom, Berserker, evil doer. To the giants, he would not appear as Odin All-Father, but as a laborer seeking work. This mask would grant him passage into their world, unseen and underestimated. The road was long, yet Odin did not falter. Along the way, he dreamed again of Gunnlöd. In his vision, she sat before the mead, her eyes shimmering with both longing and sorrow. Her lips moved as if singing, though no sound reached him. Odin awoke each time more determined. He would not only steal the mead, but he would touch the heart of the woman who guarded it. By the time he reached the foothills of Hnitbjörg, storms gathered over the peaks, their thunder echoing like a warning. Yet Odin smiled beneath his shadowed hat, for the first steps of his plan had been laid, and the path to the mead was opening before him. The journey had begun. The storm-wreathed foothills of Hnitbjörg were harsh and unforgiving, but Odin, now in the guise of Berserker, pressed onward until he reached the fields of the giant Baugi, brother of Suttungr. Unlike his kin, Baugi was not a warrior or a king. He was a farmer, his strength bent toward toil, his vast fields tended by slaves who worked from dawn until dusk. When Odin arrived, the sight before him was grim. 9 of Baugi's slaves lay dead in the dirt, their throats slit after a quarrel turned to bloodshed. Only their master remained, towering above the barren land, weary and furious at his loss. His great axe rested on his shoulder, and his voice thundered as he cursed the dead men for their folly. Odin approached with feigned humility, leaning on his staff, his cloak wrapped tightly around him. "I see you are troubled," he said, his voice low but steady. 9 hands lost, and all in a single day. Who will now bring in your harvest? Baugi turned, his massive shadow falling over the wanderer. "Who are you, little man, to question me? My slaves are dead, and my fields will rot. What care have you for my misfortune?" Odin's eye gleamed beneath the brim of his hat. "Care? Perhaps none. But skill that I have. Give me but a scythe, and I will do the work of 9 men. I ask only for fair reward at summer's end." The giant laughed, a sound like boulders tumbling down. "A mountain, 1 man to do the work of 9? You mock me. But Odin met his gaze without flinching. Test me. If I fail, you lose nothing. If I succeed, you gain a harvest worthy of kings. Intrigued, Baugi agreed. For many weeks, Odin labored in the fields, his form still cloaked in disguise. Each stroke of his scythe cut, as if guided by unseen hands. The crops fell in neat rows, faster than any mortal could manage. Day after day, he toiled without rest, and soon the golden fields bowed beneath the weight of abundance. Baugi marveled at the sight, his anger replaced with awe. When the harvest was complete, Odin stood before him. Now, giant, it is time for my reward. Baugi crossed his arms. Name it. Odin's voice dropped to a whisper, sharp as the edge of a blade. A taste of the mead of poetry, which your brother Suttungr hoards within Hnitbjörg. Baugi's eyes widened. That treasure is not mine to give. My brother guards it jealously, and none dare ask him for it. Odin's lips curved in a faint smile. Then together we shall find a way, for I have given you a harvest beyond measure, and now you owe me your aid. Thus, Odin's scheme tightened its first snare with the harvest complete. And Baugi, bound by his promise, Odin, still cloaked in the guise of berserker, turned his attention to Hnitbjörg, the mountain stronghold where the mead of poetry lay hidden. Suttungr's sorcery sealed the stone, runes etched into its face to repel intruders. No door stood open, no crack wide enough for even a whisper to escape. But Odin was not deterred. Where brute force failed, cunning would prevail. He pressed Baugi to aid him in fulfilling his debt. Reluctantly, the giant agreed, though loyal to his brother. He feared breaking his oath to Berserker, who had already proven himself more than mortal. From the earth, Odin summoned a tool, the auger called Rati, sharp as the fangs of Fenrir, strong enough to gnaw through rock. Its name meant the borer, and with it they would pierce the mountain's heart. Baugi held the tool first, pressing its biting edge against the cold stone. He pushed with all his giant strength, and the auger sank into the mountain. Chips of rock flew, dust clouded the air, and a deep groaning echoed from the walls, as though the mountain itself resisted. Hours passed, sweat dripping from Baugi's brow, until the tool pierced deeper. Yet when he pulled it out, he shook his head. The mountain is too strong. We will never break it. Odin's one eye gleamed beneath his hood. You bore poorly. Let me try. Taking Rati in his hands, Odin whispered runes of power, words older than the stones themselves. The auger bit deep, spinning faster than any mortal tool. The rock groaned louder, a tunnel widening, until at last Baugi stepped back, astonished. It goes through, he said. Yeah. But Baugi's loyalty faltered. He thought of his brother Suttungr, of the wrath he would face if he betrayed him, and so he tested Berserker. If the hole is true, prove it. Blow into it and see if the dust flies out. Odin laughed softly, sensing the trick. Instead, he knelt and placed his lips against the hole, breathing inward. The dust of stone filled his lungs, proof that the passage was clear. Baugi's deception had failed. Odin straightened, his smile sharp. The path is open, but he would not enter yet. He knew that beyond the wall lay more than stone. It held the watchful eyes of Gunnlöd, the guardian of the mead. For now the tunnel was his secret, a passage carved by cunning and the strength of oath-bound debt. Thus the mountain was pierced, its defenses breached, though Suttungr remained unaware. Destiny moved closer, and Odin's plan edged toward its final act, through the tunnel, bored by Rati. Odin slipped into the heart of Hnitbjörg. He shed the name Berserker, as one discards an old cloak, and walked forward with new purpose. The air was heavy with enchantment, thick with the golden glow of the mead of poetry. The cavern pulsed with its light. as though the jars and cauldron held not liquid, but the very soul of creation. And there, before the vessels, sat Gunnlöd, daughter of Suttungr. She was as he had seen in dreams. Hair like midnight spilling over her shoulders, ember eyes deep with longing, her beauty both sorrowful and radiant. She turned as he entered, her voice firm but tinged with loneliness. "Who are you, stranger, to trespass in this sacred place?" Odin bowed, his presence humble yet commanding. "I am but a wanderer, drawn by song and fate. I have crossed mountains and storms to stand before you, for I heard your voice in the dark, and it called me here." Gunnlöd's suspicion wavered. For years she had guarded the mead alone, singing only to herself and to the vessels. The stranger's words pierced the solitude she carried like chains. She studied him, sensing both danger and destiny. Odin stepped closer, his single eye gleaming with warmth. "You are not only a guardian, you are a poem unwritten, a song unsung. Who else could weave such sorrow into beauty? But you, Gunnlöd, the mead shines brighter in your presence, for it knows your heart." Her defenses weakened. No one had ever spoken to her thus, seeing not merely the warden of the mead, but the woman herself. She felt the weight of years melt, replaced by the thrill of being desired, of being known. "Still," she whispered, "the mead is my father's treasure. If you seek it, you will not find mercy from him. Or from me." Odin's voice softened, low as a secret shared. "I do not ask for it by theft or force, only for your trust. 3 nights I will stay with you. In return, grant me but 3 sips of the mead. No more." Gunnlöd's heart wrestled with her duty and her longing. To betray her father's command was unthinkable. Yet the stranger's gaze burned with a fire she had never felt before. Desire and destiny intertwined, and at last she nodded. 3 nights and 3 sips, she said. Thus began their union. Odin stayed by her side, weaving words of passion and comfort, holding her in the darkness of the mountain. Gunnlöd surrendered to him, not as a god defeated, but as a woman who had been alone too long. In her arms, Odin bound the final knot of his plan. The mead, drawing nearer to his lips with each passing moment, the cavern of Hnitbjörg became a world of its own, sealed from the storms outside, filled with golden glow, and the quiet rhythm of 2 hearts drawn together. Gunnlöd had surrendered her solitude, and Odin, in his cloak of disguise, embraced her with words and warmth. The first night was tentative, like the first stroke of a harp's string. Gunnlöd sat close to Odin, still cautious, her eyes flickering between his face and the shining vessels of the mead. He spoke to her not as a thief or intruder, but as a man who saw her loneliness. His words were gentle verses, weaving praise for her songs, her strength, her beauty, hidden from the world. She softened, allowing his hand to brush hers. That night she let him rest beside her, and for the first time in years, she did not sleep alone. The second night burned brighter. Odin's voice turned to poetry, each line falling like honey from his lips. He told her that she herself was a poem, a secret treasure, more radiant than the mead. She guarded. Gunnlöd's laughter echoed through the cavern, breaking the silence that had long bound her. Her sorrow melted into desire, and she leaned into him, her lips trembling with both fear and longing. Odin held her close, his touch tender yet sure, until their breaths became one. The third night was fire. By then, Gunnlöd no longer looked upon him as a stranger, but as destiny itself. She gave herself wholly, her heart and body entwined with his. In the darkness, she whispered her secrets, her fears, and her hopes. Odin listened, his mind ever sharp, storing her words as carefully as he would. A room, yet even as passion consumed them, his eye never left the glow of the mead. For Odin, These nights were not only seduction, but strategy. Every caress, every whispered verse was a step toward his true goal. But he was not without conflict. In Gunnlöd's embrace, he felt a tenderness he had not foreseen. She was no mere god to be tricked. She was a woman of sorrow and strength, and in her trust, she gave him more than access to the mead. She gave him her heart. When dawn followed the third night, Gunnlöd took his hand and led him to the vessels. Her voice was soft but steady. "You have honored your word, now take your 3 sips." As promised, Odin's eye gleamed, for the moment had come, at last. After 3 nights of passion and whispered vows, Odin stood before the glowing vessels of the Mead of Poetry. The cauldron Othra and the golden jars, Son and Bothen, shimmered, like suns captured in stone. Their radiance filled the cavern, painting the walls with verses unseen, as though the mead itself longed to leap forth into song. Gunnlöd's hand lingered in his, her eyes heavy with both love and trust. 3 sips, she reminded him, her voice soft, fragile. That was the bargain. Odin smiled, though his heart stirred with conflict. He had deceived her, woven passion into a snare, yet he felt the weight of her faith pressing against his resolve. Still, his purpose was unshakable. The mead must not remain in the hands of giants. Its power belonged to the gods. And to him, he approached the cauldron. The first sip touched his lips, and fire coursed through him. The world expanded, every sound a verse, every breath a song. Knowledge flooded him, ancient and vast, flowing like rivers of stars. The second sip was deeper. His tongue burned with power. His mind sharpened to a blade finer than any forged by dwarves. He felt words form upon his lips, words that could bind, heal, and destroy with equal force. The third sip he took without hesitation, yet it was no mere mouthful. Odin tilted back the cauldron itself, swallowing every last drop. The mead poured into him in torrents, filling him beyond measure, until nothing remained in Other, Sonen, or Bothen but echoes of golden light. Behind him, Gunnlöd gasped. Her amber eyes widened with betrayal, tears brimming as she realized the truth. "You promised," she whispered, her voice breaking like glass. Odin turned, his face shadowed by both triumph and sorrow. "I promised 3 sips, and I have kept my word. 3 sips that drank all." The cavern trembled, as though the mountain itself knew what had been unleashed. The glow of the mead now burned within Odin, his form radiant, his single eye blazing like a star. Gunnlöd fell to her knees, torn between fury and despair, yet still bound by the love she had given him. Odin stepped back, his cloak swirling around him, already preparing for escape, for he knew Suttungr would soon sense the theft, and the wrath of the giant would be swift. Thus the All-Father claimed the Mead of Poetry, not by force of arms, but by cunning, deceit, and passion. The words of Kvasir lived again, now flowing through Odin's blood. The gift of poetry was his, and through him, it would touch the world. But even the wisest of gods could not foresee the cost. The cavern shook with the aftermath of Odin's betrayal. The mead of poetry, once contained in golden vessels, now surged through his veins, filling him with a power beyond measure. Words danced on his tongue like flames, his mind alight with the rhythm of creation. He could feel every verse of the cosmos, every hidden rune, every secret ever whispered by gods or men. But there was no time to revel in triumph. Already the mountain groaned, its wards broken by the theft. Far above, Suttungr stirred in rage, sensing the loss. Odin knew the giant's vengeance would fall upon him with storm and fury. He had taken the mead, but could he escape with it? He turned to Gunnlöd, who still knelt upon the stone floor, Tears streamed down her face, her body trembling with sorrow and anger. "Why?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Why deceive me, when I gave you everything?" Odin's gaze softened for a heartbeat. "Because destiny demands it. Forgive me, Gunnlöd. Your gift will not be forgotten." Before her eyes, he spread his arms, and his form began to shift. His cloak became feathers, his staff melted into talons, and his body twisted into the mighty form of an eagle. Wings unfurled, vast and strong, stirring the air into a whirlwind. His single golden eye still burned with purpose, fierce and unyielding. With a cry that echoed like thunder, Odin launched himself upward, talons scraping stone as he rose toward the tunnel he had carved with Rati. The cavern roared around him, as though the mountain itself sought to trap him inside. Loose rock fell, dust choking the air, but the eagle's wings beat harder, forcing a path to freedom. Gunnlöd watched, her heart torn. Part of her longed to reach for him, to cling to the love she had felt in those 3 nights. Yet betrayal burned too deeply. She screamed his name, her voice breaking against the cavern walls. But Odin did not look back. His wings carried him into the dark tunnel, the golden glow of the mead trailing behind him like fire. Beyond the mountain's walls, the storm broke. Lightning split the skies, thunder roared like war drums, and in the distance, Suttungr rose in fury. The giant's eyes blazed as he saw a golden eagle burst from the mountain peak, glowing brighter than the storm itself. The chase had begun. The skies above Hnitbjörg split with storm and fury. As Odin soared from the mountain, in the form of a golden eagle, his wings beat with thunderous force, scattering clouds, as radiant trails of mead light spilled from his beak and feathers. The gift of poetry now coursed within him, and yet his escape was not secure. For Suttungr, the giant, had seen, from the mountain's shadow, Suttungr let out a roar that shook the 9 worlds. His body twisted and surged, bones cracking, flesh bending, until he too took on the shape of an eagle. Vast, black and terrible wings, stretching wide enough to blot out the sun. His feathers dripped with storm-dark rain, his talons sharp as spears, and his beak glowed with wrath. The chase began. Odin's golden form cut across the heavens, swift as lightning, but behind him came the shadow of Suttungr, his wings pounding like war drums. The storm itself seemed to follow the giant, clouds boiling and winds screaming, as if the sky sought to aid him. Mountains trembled beneath their flight, seas churned, and mortals on the earth below gazed upward in terror at the battle of birds blazing across the heavens. Odin's heart pounded, not from fear, but from urgency. Every drop of mead that spilled from his feathers fell to Midgard below, golden rain that touched farmers and fools alike. Some who caught it were blessed with inspiration, their words turning to song and prophecy. Others, unworthy, were filled only with nonsense, their tongues wagging with drunken babble. Even in his flight, Odin could not control what was lost. Closer and closer came Suttungr, his black wings slicing through the storm. The giant's screech tore the air, a cry of vengeance and rage. His talons snapped inches from Odin's tail feathers. The Allfather twisted sharply, climbing higher into the winds, his form gleaming like a star against the storm. He whispered runes even as he flew, calling upon the power of air and speed, bending the winds to his path. Far ahead, the shining walls of Asgard came into view, their golden spires glinting in the distance. The gods stood upon the ramparts, watching with awe and fear as their lord raced toward them. A giant eagle of wrath, close upon his tail, Odin pushed harder, his wings burning with effort. Every beat carried not only his body, but the weight of destiny. Behind him, Suttungr roared, promising vengeance that would echo through eternity. It was no longer just a flight. It was a race between wisdom and wrath, poetry and brute power, light and shadow, and the sky itself held its breath. The sky thundered as Odin, in the form of a golden eagle, streaked toward Asgard with the mead burning within him. His wings glowed with radiant fire, his feathers trailing golden sparks that fell to Midgard below. Behind him, the vast black eagle of Suttungr tore through the storm, his shrieks of rage echoing like the breaking of mountains. The gods watched from the ramparts of Asgard, their eyes fixed on the chase. Heimdall, the ever-watchful, blew the Gjallarhorn in warning, its deep sound shaking the halls of Valhalla. The Aesir prepared themselves, for if Odin failed, the mead would be lost forever, and perhaps Asgard itself would be torn by the wrath of Suttungr. But Odin, though swift, carried more than his own weight. His beak was filled with the mead, his belly swollen with its golden fire. The flight was heavy, each wing beat labored, and in that strain drops began to fall. At first, only a trickle spilled from his beak, golden droplets that rained upon Midgard. Where they fell, some mortals rose with sudden inspiration, their tongues weaving verses of beauty and wisdom. Farmers sang to their fields, children spoke in riddles wiser than kings, and skalds birthed songs that echoed for generations. These were the lucky ones, blessed by the spilled nectar. Yet not all the drops carried purity. Some fell as dregs, thick and bitter, and those who drank of them babbled nonsense, their words twisted, their thoughts broken. For the mead, born of murder and greed as much as wisdom, carried both gift and curse. As Odin neared Asgard, the spilling grew worse. Streams of golden light poured from him, scattering across the worlds. Suttungr roared in triumph, believing the treasure was being lost. But Odin, cunning even in desperation, tilted his flight, spilling deliberately, letting just enough fall to Midgard so that men might share richery in the gift, while keeping the true essence safe for the gods. Below, mortals rejoiced and raved alike. Some became poets, singers, and prophets. Others became fools, their tongues wagging with drunken babble. Thus was born the distinction between true poetry, the divine gift of inspiration, and false verse, the nonsense of the unworthy. At last, Odin's wings beat their final stretch. The shining walls of Asgard loomed before him, golden light beckoning him home. The mead within him had been diminished, but not lost. The purest portion remained his, carried to the halls of the gods. Behind him, Suttungr screeched in despair as Odin slipped beyond Asgard's gates. The giant's wings faltered, his strength no match for the defenses of the divine realm. Beaten, he wheeled away into the storm, his cries fading into the distance. And so the mead was brought to Asgard, but its spilling had already changed the fate of Midgard forever. When Odin crossed the golden gates of Asgard, with the mead of poetry burning within him, the gods rejoiced. The All-Father had triumphed, where none thought possible. The purest portion of Kvasir's essence, the heart of wisdom and verse, was now secured for the halls of the Aesir. From that day forward, Odin would share it sparingly, granting its fire only to those he deemed worthy. Yet what spilled along the way could not be gathered back. Drops of mead had fallen to Midgard, scattered across fields, rivers, and villages. And from those drops, humanity inherited something wondrous and strange: the gift of poetry. At first, it came as whispers in the wind. A shepherd, gazing upon the stars, spoke in verse, without knowing why. A child sang words that made her mother weep, though she had never been taught. Warriors, standing before battle, shouted chants that stirred courage in the hearts of their kin. Farmers turned their toil into songs, lifting weary hands with rhythm and rhyme. The gift spread like fire on dry grass. Skalds and poets arose among mortals, their tongues touched by the golden rain. They spoke truths hidden beneath lies, turned sorrow into song, and bound the deeds of kings into verses that outlived the men themselves. Through poetry, the common and the mighty alike found immortality. But the Mead's dual nature revealed itself. Those blessed by the pure drops sang with clarity and power, their words ringing true across generations. Yet others, who caught only the dregs, stumbled in drunken babble. Their verses were nonsense, their boasts hollow, their songs laughed at by wiser ears. From this divide came the distinction between the true poet, touched by inspiration, and the fool's tongue, which speaks without meaning. In Asgard, Odin watched with satisfaction. His plan had succeeded. He had claimed the mead for the gods, while humanity too had received its share. The All-Father knew that through poetry, mortals would carry fragments of divine wisdom, shaping their world not only with swords and hammers, but with words. Thus, poetry became more than art. It was prophecy, memory, and magic. Verses could bless or curse, inspire or deceive. The power of the mead lived on, flowing from God to man, from man to song, echoing across the ages. And though the mead rested safe within Asgard's halls, Odin smiled at the thought that the world itself now echoed with fragments of Kvasir's voice. For in every inspired word, in every poem that touched the soul, the mead still lived. The mead of poetry was not made of purity alone. Born of Kvasir's blood and dwarven craft, it carried within it both the brilliance of wisdom and the shadow of deceit. When Odin flew across the skies as a golden eagle, not every drop that spilled was radiant nectar. Some were dregs, bitter, thick, tainted with the greed and murder from which the mead was first forged. These dregs fell to Midgard as well, and where they landed, they seeded folly. Not all who drank of the golden rain found inspiration. Some were filled instead with arrogance and empty chatter. Their tongues moved quickly, their words loud, yet their songs rang hollow. They mistook noise for verse, boasting for poetry. At first, people marveled. These men and women spoke with fervor, claiming visions and truths. But soon their hollowness was revealed. Their words clattered like broken shields, their rhymes faltered, and their prophecies failed. They sowed confusion rather than wisdom, and many were misled by their false tongues. Thus was born the curse of the mead, that alongside true poets would come pretenders, those touched not by inspiration, by drunken nonsense. The skalds whispered that these dreg drinkers were as dangerous as liars in court or cowards in war. They filled halls with noise, their verses inflating kings with vanity or steering warriors toward ruin. Some became jesters, mocked for their babbling. Others clawed their way into power, deceiving the gullible with hollow speech. Their legacy was not beauty, but confusion. From them came false songs, twisted histories, and shallow praise. And so humanity learned that not every voice raised in poetry carried the spark of the divine. In Asgard, Odin watched and accepted this balance. For even folly had its place in the great design. The pure and the false must walk together, he mused. For how else shall mortals learn to seek truth from lies? We're pucentrics. Yet in Midgard, the line between gift and curse was thin. One poet's words could inspire a kingdom to greatness, while another's empty song could drive it to ruin. The mead had scattered blessings, but it had also sown seeds of madness. From that day forward, mortals divided their poets into two kinds: the true skalds, who spoke with clarity and vision, and the fools, whose tongues were wagged by the dregs of the mead. Both traced their voices back to Odin's flight. Both bore fragments of Kvasir's blood, but one was a gift, the other a warning. And so it was that poetry, like fire, became both tool and danger, able to warm or to burn, to guide or to deceive. The storm broke as Odin crossed the golden gates of Asgard, his eagle form streaked with the last light of the mead. Behind him, the cries of Suttungr faded into the clouds, the giant defeated in his pursuit. Odin had triumphed. He had stolen the mead of poetry from the giants, secured its essence within himself, and carried it home to the realm of the gods. The Aesir gathered in the great hall of Valhalla, their eyes fixed on the All-Father as he descended in radiant form, his wings folded, feathers melting away until once more. He stood as Odin One-Eye, tall and cloaked in power, his gaze burning with golden fire. From his mouth spilled verses, songs of victory, words woven with wisdom so deep that even the gods fell silent in awe. He placed the vessels he had carried, the remnants of Otharir, Son and Bothan, upon a high altar, for the true essence of the mead lived within him, bound to his breath, his blood, his very being. From that day, Odin became not only the god of war and wisdom, but the keeper of poetry, the guardian of inspiration itself. Yet, he did not hoard it for himself alone. Odin shared the mead sparingly, pouring small draughts into the cups of those he deemed worthy. Skalds chosen to speak truth, kings whose words needed weight, warriors whose chants would stir their comrades in battle. Those who drank became voices of fire, their songs echoing through generations. But Odin was ever cautious. He knew the mead had spilled into Midgard, blessing mortals beyond his control. True poets and fools alike already carried fragments of its power. What remained in Asgard had to be preserved, lest it be lost again to giants, or squandered by those unworthy. So he sealed the mead within his halls, locking it behind runes only he could command. The gods feasted that night, drinking mead of honey while Odin recited verses no ear had ever heard. His words painted pictures of the 9 worlds, of creation's birth, of battles yet to come. Even Thor, whose heart was bound more to strength than song, felt tears sting his eyes. Frigga whispered that the maid was more beautiful than the treasures of her halls, and so the mead of poetry was secured in Asgard, no longer in the hands of dwarves or giants, but under the watchful eye of Odin. The All-Father had won his prize. But in the hearts of men and gods alike, the true power of poetry was only beginning to unfold. Though the mead of poetry was secured in Asgard, its echoes had already taken root in Midgard. Drops that spilled from Odin's flight were not lost. They lived on in the hearts of men and women who tasted them. From those mortals arose the first poets, voices unlike any heard before. They were not kings nor warriors, but ordinary folk. A shepherd by the river found himself speaking verses as he tended his flock, his words carrying truths deeper than the river's current. A farmer sang as he ploughed, his song guiding the oxen while lifting the spirits of his village. A wandering woman spoke riddles that confounded wise men, her tongue sharp with wit drawn from unseen wells. These were the first skalds, poets whose tongues had been touched by the mead. Their words spread like fire through the lands. People gathered in halls to hear them sing. They told of the deeds of gods and men, weaving memory into song so that no act of courage or sorrow would be forgotten. Through their verses, the past became immortal, living not only in stone and sword, but in the breath of poetry. But the gift was not without peril. Some who claimed the mead's blessing were liars, their words hollow, their verses drunk with vanity. They sought not to preserve truth, but to win favor from kings or coin from eager listeners. Thus began the rivalry between true poets, whose words shone with inspiration, and false tongues, whose empty rhymes rang like broken shields. The the first true poets did not seek glory. Their voices rose in firelit halls, in village gatherings, even in lonely fields under the stars. They spoke of love and loss, of honor and betrayal, of the mysteries of gods who walked unseen among mortals. Their verses stirred men to courage in battle, soothed the grieving, and preserved wisdom for generations yet unborn. And always, in their songs, there was a trace of the mead. Some lines burned too brightly to have come from mortal lips. Some truths were too sharp, too piercing. Those who listened whispered that the poets' voices were touched by Odin himself, that the All-Father had chosen them to carry fragments of his prize. Praise. Thus the legacy of the mead spread across Midgard, not by bloodshed, but by song. And in Asgard, Odin watched with satisfaction, for though he kept the mead locked in his halls, he had allowed enough to spill that mortals, too, might taste its fire. The first poets had risen, and their words would outlast stone and steel as the gift of poetry spread across Midgard. It did not remain only in the mouths of shepherds and wanderers. Soon kings themselves turned their eyes to it, for they saw in verse a power that could outlast steel. A sword could win a battle, but a song could win eternity. In the smoky halls of chieftains, skalds, poets blessed by the mead's echo, were welcomed and prized. Their words became weapons, as sharp as any blade. A king with a skald at his side did not merely rule with strength. He ruled with reputation. For what use was victory if no one remembered it? What use was wealth if no song carried your name into the ages? And so began the rivalry of kings. They competed not only in arms, but in verse. Some waged war for poets, luring skalds with gold, feasts, or promises of fame. Others banished those who sang ill of them, their anger sharper than any axe. Skalds became both honored and feared, for a well-crafted verse could crown a king with glory, or strip him of honor before all. One tale tells of two rival kings who met not upon the battlefield, but in the mead hall. Each brought forth his poet, and before their gathered men they waged war in song. One skald sang of his king's victories, his words like thunder, his verses weaving fear into the hearts of foes. The other answered with sharper wit, mocking the first king's failures, twisting his deeds into shame. The hall roared with laughter, and the rival king won the night without raising a sword. Yet such contests carried danger, for poetry could stir pride as swiftly as it healed it. Some kings grew cruel, demanding praise from their skalds, punishing those who dared speak truth. Others sought to silence rivals by killing their poets, thinking that without song their enemies would fade into dust. But they did not understand words, once spoken, live longer than kings. In Asgard, Odin watched with a smile. The mead had seeded more than verse. It had seeded power. Mortals now wielded words as weapons, echoing the god's own craft. The All-Father knew that poetry would shape kingdoms as surely as battle. And he was content. Thus, the rivalry of kings grew, driven not only by steel but by song. Poets became the keepers of memory, and in their mouths lay the fate of rulers. Victory was no longer only won with armies, but with verses that outlasted time. In the wake of the rivalry of kings, there arose another contest, one not of steel, but of verse. Skalds, those poets touched by the mead's echo, began to face one another in public halls and courts. Their weapons were not swords, but words, sharp and shining as spears. And so was born the war of words. It began simply, with poets trading insults in jest, a verse here, a rhyme there, laughter ringing in the hall. But soon the context grew fierce. Skalds sharpened their wit like blades, crafting verses designed to wound pride and tarnish honor. They spoke of rival kings' failures, of warriors who fled in battle, of families shamed by cowardice. Each word landed like a blow, and the audience roared as though witnessing a duel of axes. The power of these contests was immense. A warrior slain on the field might be forgotten, but a warrior mocked in verse lived, forever in shame. A king could win 10 battles, yet if one clever poet reduced him to laughter, his glory dimmed. The Mede's gift had created not only beauty, but danger. For words could maim the spirit more deeply than iron. Tales spread of skalds, who destroyed reputations with a single stanza. One sang of a lord who boasted of wealth, only to reveal in rhyme that his treasure was stolen. Another mocked a warrior's courage, painting him as a man who wept at the sight of steel. The mocked men often sought vengeance, but killing a skald only made the verses burn brighter, carried on the lips of others. Not all contests were cruel. Some became games of wit, riddles traded like coin, each line more clever than the last. The people gathered to hear these duels as eagerly as they would watch a battle. Mead halls filled with voices chanting in chorus, gasping at sharp retorts, cheering for the victor. The war of words became as much a sport as combat, but one with longer-lasting wounds and victories. Odin, who had tasted the Mede's full power, looked upon this with both pride and caution. He knew words were tools of magic, sharper than any blade when wielded. Well, in these duels of poets, he saw reflections of his own cunning, his mastery of verse and rune. Yet he also saw danger. The Mede's curse of dregs gave rise to fools who shouted nonsense, dragging truth into mockery. Still, the war of words endured. Kings prized poets not only for praise, but for their skill in battle of tongue. Some rulers even wagered gold or land on the outcomes of these contests. Thus, poetry, once the voice of shepherds and singers, became both weapon and currency among mortals. And the mead of poetry, spilled from Odin's beak, continued to shape the world. One verse, one duel, one reputation at a time, the mead of poetry had reshaped the world of men and gods alike. Mortals sang with voices of fire. Kings rose and fell on verses, and even the halls of Asgard rang with new songs. But among the Aesir, not all were content. Loki, the trickster, watched with envy. He had stood beside Odin in many ventures, aided him with schemes and deceptions, but never had he been granted the mead. Odin shared its draughts sparingly, gifting only to those he deemed worthy, to skalds, to warriors, to kings whose words carried weight. But to Loki, none, for Odin feared what mischief might spring if the trickster's tongue were fueled by the mead's fire. And so Loki fumed in silence. His words were clever already, his lies sharp enough to topple kingdoms, yet he longed for more. He imagined himself the greatest poet, his verses woven into the fabric of fate itself. He dreamed of mocking Odin in riddles no one could solve, twisting truth so finely that even the Norns would falter. But dreams without mead were only smoke. One night, as the gods feasted in Valhalla, Loki listened as Odin recited verses glowing with power. The skalds who drank from his hand sang songs that stirred the hearts of all who heard them. Loki smiled outwardly, but within him burned envy hotter than Muspelheim's fire. Why should Odin alone hold this gift? He whispered to himself. Why should mortals and skalds taste it, but not I? Who outwits gods and giants alike? Can Loki's mind turned to Gunnlöd, the betrayed daughter of Suttungr. Rumors told that her sorrow had not faded, that she still cursed Odin's name. Perhaps she would be an ally, or perhaps, Loki mused, he could twist her grief for his own gain. Yet deep within, Loki also feared the mead. for he knew its dual nature. The dregs had already spawned fools and liars among mortals. But Dew, what would it do to him, whose tongue was already a blade? Would it sharpen him into legend, or consume him in madness? Still, his envy outweighed his fear. The mead had given mortals power to rival kings. If Loki could seize even a drop, he would no longer be merely a trickster. He would be the master of words, the god of poets, the voice that could shake the 9 worlds. And so he vowed in secret, one day, the mead would be his. Not every mortal who tasted the mead of poetry rose to greatness. The golden drops that fell from Odin's beak carried both gift and curse, and while some became true poets, others became little more than drunken fools. These were the fools who drank, unworthy vessels of Kvasir's blood, their tongues twisted by the dregs of the divine brew. In taverns and mead halls, such men and women boasted loudly, claiming the mantle of poet. Though their words rang empty, they spoke in rhymes broken and crooked, shouting nonsense that made crowds laugh, not in admiration, but in mockery. Their verses stumbled like a drunkard's steps, their boasts grand but hollow. They believed themselves inspired, but their tongues carried only folly. One fool sang of kings who had never lived, battles that had never been fought, victories won only in his imagination. Another claimed visions of prophecy. But his words shifted with every cup of ale, so that no one could tell truth from drunken slur. Yet still some followed them, dazzled by the noise and the bravado, mistaking volume for wisdom. These pretenders often sought kings' halls, begging to be heard. A few were welcomed at first, their boldness mistaken for brilliance. But when their verses failed to inspire, when their mock prophecies brought ruin instead of glory, they were cast out in shame. Some met cruel fates, wandering as jesters or madmen, mocked wherever they went, and yet their words still carried danger. For the mead's dregs had power. If twisted, lies could spread as swiftly as truth, and folly could sway the hearts of the foolish. Some false poets rose not through skill, but through manipulation, flattering lords with hollow praise. Kings drunk on vanity sometimes cherished these empty tongues more than the true skalds who dared to speak honestly. In this way, the mead's curse poisoned thrones as easily as it lifted them. Among the true skalds, there was disdain for these pretenders. They called them mouths of the dregs, and their verses were said to be no more than the froth of cheap ale. Yet even the greatest poets admitted in whispers that there was danger in their babble, for sometimes, amid the nonsense, a fragment of truth would slip through, mocking words that revealed shame, careless boasts that cut deeper than intended. Even folly, it seemed, had teeth. Odin, watching from Asgard, allowed it to be so, for the Allfather understood the gift of the mead was never meant to be pure, as wisdom must be tested by lies. So true poetry must stand against falsehood. Only then could mortals learn the difference between song that endures and noise that fades. Thus the fools who drank left their mark upon the world, not as poets of glory, but as reminders that even divine gifts may falter when poured into unworthy vessels. Though much of the mead of poetry inspired glory and triumph, not all its verses sang of victory. From its drops also arose the songs of sorrow, poetry born of grief, mourning, and loss. For just as joy seeks a voice, so too does pain. The first such songs came from widows and mothers who had watched warriors fall in battle. Their laments poured forth, not as cries, but as verses. Their voices, touched by the mead's echo, carried the weight of sorrow into words so haunting that even hardened warriors wept. These laments were sung in halls and on battlefields alike, a reminder that victory was always shadowed by grief. One tale tells of a woman who stood before a smoking battlefield, her husband and sons slain among the fallen. She raised her voice in song, not to curse the gods, but to give shape to her grief. Her words moved even her enemies, who lowered their weapons and bowed their heads. Her lament was carried across the land, remembered for generations as a song that healed hearts, even as it mourned. The mead had given mortals the power not only to praise kings and glorify deeds, but also to speak truth to sorrow. These songs became more than laments. They were vessels of memory. They preserved the names of the fallen, ensuring that even the lowest farmer who died in battle was not forgotten. Through verse, grief was transformed into immortality, yet the songs of sorrow carried danger as well. Some poets used grief to fuel vengeance, their verses stoking hatred until blood feuds consumed entire clans. A single lament, sharpened into accusation, could ignite wars as easily as it could heal. Thus sorrow became both balm and spark, comfort to the mourning, yet fire to the wrathful. In Asgard, Odin listened. He too knew grief, for he had given much in pursuit of wisdom. An eye, his own blood upon Yggdrasil, and the trust of Gunnlöd. The songs of sorrow reached him, and though he was a god, they pierced his heart as deeply as any mortal's. For even in the halls of the divine, loss was no stranger. And so poetry grew not only in feasts and battles, but in funerals and mourning fires. The mead's gift had given mortals a voice to shape their pain into song, to weave tears into verses that would outlast even stone cairns. Thus the world learned that poetry was not only for glory, but for grief, that the tongue could carry both praise and lament, joy and sorrow, and that both were needed for the fullness of life. From the mead of poetry rose not only songs of triumph and sorrow, but also prophecy. For within the blood of Kvasir lay knowledge deeper than memory, a vision of what was, what is, and what is yet to come. And so among mortals there arose poets who spoke not of past deeds, but of doom yet unseen. These were the prophets of doom, voices whose words carried the shadow of Ragnarok. Their verses were dark, yet compelling. They sang of the sun swallowed by wolves, of the world drowned in fire and flood, of gods and giants, locked in their final battle. Their words chilled hearts, yet none could turn away, for the mead's power lent them weight that could not be dismissed. Even kings trembled when such poets raised their voices in the halls. One prophet, it is told, stood in a crowded feast and began to sing unbidden. His verses flowed like thunder, foretelling the death of the king who sat before him. Laughter turned to silence, feasting to dread. Days later, the king fell in battle, struck by a spear as the poet had sung. From that day, none dared ignore the doom songs. The prophets were both feared and honored. Some were welcomed as seers, their visions shaping the choices of rulers. Others were cast out, their words too heavy, too unwelcome, for men who sought only comfort. But whether embraced or shunned, they could not be silenced. For the mead had planted truth within them, and truth, once sung, echoed forever. Yet these visions were not always clear. Some poets spoke riddles so twisted that none could unravel them until the doom had already come to pass. Others spoke too plainly, their prophecies stirring panic and despair. Villages burned their seers, thinking to kill the doom with the prophet. But the verses lived on in memory, surfacing when fate proved them true. In Asgard, Odin listened with grim recognition. He himself had drunk the mead's fullness, and within him, too, lived the shadow of Ragnarok. He knew the end would come, that even gods must fall, but he kept this knowledge close, feeding only fragments to mortals. Yet through the prophets, the mead whispered secrets he had hoped to guard. Thus the mead gave mortals more than song. It gave them a glimpse of fate itself, and though men feared it, they also clung to it. For even in doom, there is power in knowing. The prophets of doom walked the earth, their voices heavy with the weight of worlds, their songs carrying the first echoes of the end. Not all songs born of the mead carried sorrow or doom. Among the verses scattered across Midgard were those that sang of love, the longing of hearts, the fire of passion, the sweetness of union, and the ache of parting. These became the lovers' ballads, and they touched men and women as deeply as any prophecy or praise. In village halls, young couples whispered verses to each other by the hearth. Their words, though simple, carried the glow of the mead, transforming awkward confessions into lines of beauty. Your eyes are brighter than dawn on the fjord. One youth sang, and his beloved wept, for the truth of her worth was carried in his voice. Wives sang laments when their husbands went to war, their verses binding their love across distance and danger. Husbands, too, composed songs in secret, carrying them like weapons of the heart, to be spoken only upon their return. Such ballads became charms of loyalty, guarding bonds against the pull of time and temptation. Not all ballads ended in joy. Some told of forbidden love, whispered in secret beneath the stars. A maiden and a warrior from rival clans met in shadow, their verses weaving promises that could never be fulfilled. Their songs, though sweet, carried sorrow, and when discovered, their love ended in tragedy. Yet their ballad lived on, sung by others, a reminder that even doomed love can shape the heart forever. Kings too sought ballads. They ordered poets to compose verses that exalted their queens, comparing them to the sun, the sea, or the brightest star. Some queens responded with songs of their own, soft but sharp, reminding their lords that love was not won with gold or crowns, but with devotion. These ballads softened halls of war into places of tenderness. If only for a night, even the gods were not untouched. Freyja, goddess of love, wept and smiled as she listened to mortals sing, for in their voices she heard echoes of her own joys and griefs. Odin himself recalled Gunnlöd, the daughter of Suttungr, whom he had deceived but truly touched. In the lovers' ballads of mortals, he felt the shadow of her sorrow and the sweetness he had once tasted in her arms. Thus love joined the tapestry of the mead's gift. Just as it gave men the power to praise, to mourn, and to foretell, it gave them the voice to love. Through ballads, mortals spoke the unspeakable, made visible the invisible bond between souls. And though some songs ended in laughter and others in tears, all of them endured, echoing through generations. For love, like poetry, is eternal. From the Mead of Poetry also came songs of war, verses that stirred blood, sharpened steel, and gave courage where fear might reign. These were the warrior chants, born in mead halls before battles, shouted across fields as blades clashed, echoing like thunder in the hearts of men. At first they were simple, short lines repeated in rhythm, easy for many voices to remember. But even in simplicity, they carried power, for the mead's gift gave them weight beyond mere sound. A chant could make weary men feel invincible, their steps heavy with strength, their hands firm on spear and shield. Warriors stood shoulder to shoulder, stamping feet and beating weapons on shields as they roared their chants. These songs bound them together, each voice joining the next, until the army became one body, one will. Fear withered before such unity, while enemies trembled at the sound, thinking they faced not men, but gods. One tale tells of a small band of warriors who stood against a much larger host. Their skald began a chant, his words fierce and unyielding. The warriors repeated after him, their voices growing like fire in the wind. When battle came, their foes faltered, unnerved by the fury in their song. Though outnumbered, the small band won. their chant remembered as the true weapon of victory. But warrior chants were not only for battle. After victory, they became songs of triumph, echoing through feasting halls. After defeat, they turned into laments of valor, honoring those who had fallen. Even in mourning, the rhythm of battle lived on. In Asgard, Odin listened and approved. He knew the power of such verses well, for he himself had whispered war spells into the ears of warriors. The chants of mortals were reflections of his own rune songs, carrying the same power to inspire courage and bind men in unity. Thus poetry proved itself not only as art, but as weapon. For while swords cut flesh, chants cut fear, and often fear was the deadliest foe. Though Odin had seized the mead of poetry with cunning, he did not keep its power for himself alone. From its fire he crafted verses of wisdom, spoken in riddles and proverbs, shared among gods and mortals alike. These became known as the wisdom of Odin, poems that taught, warned, and revealed truths hidden from plain sight. He recited them in the great halls of Asgard, where the gods listened in silence, their hearts pierced by the weight of his words. Cattle die, kinsmen die, and one day you too shall die, he sang, but a good name never dies, if won by noble deeds. The gods nodded, for even immortals could not escape fate, and Odin's wisdom was a torch in the darkness. Yet he also wandered Midgard in disguise, carrying his verses to mortals. Sometimes he appeared as an old traveler by the fire, offering riddles to those who welcomed him. Sometimes he tested kings, asking questions no warrior could answer, rewarding the wise with counsel, and mocking the foolish with sharp verse. Mortals whispered that wisdom was never free, that Odin gave it in fragments, but always demanded something in return. His wisdom songs spoke of courage and humility, of honor and deceit, of the balance between strength and cunning. He warned of greed, of betrayal, of the folly of forgetting one's kin. But hidden within many of his verses were deeper truths, secrets of the runes, hints of Ragnarok, glimpses of fates yet to come. Only the most perceptive could see beyond the surface. Mortals treasured these poems, repeating them to their children, inscribing them upon wood and stone. Over time they became the sayings of the people, shaping not only kings, but the common folk as well. In this way, Odin's wisdom lived beyond his lips, flowing through generations as enduring lore. But even in his gift, Odin was cunning. He gave enough to guide, but never enough to rival his own knowledge. For he knew that wisdom hoarded is power, and power shared too freely is soon diminished. Thus the wisdom of Odin spread across the 9 worlds, verses born from the mead, yet sharpened by the All-Father's will. They were both gift and test, treasure and trap, guiding men toward greatness, even as they reminded them of their limits.